3-2 on Alvarez in the 6th. Strike 3 called.
Freezing hitters with fastballs with 2 strikes is something that I used to watch Bartolo Colon do it back in Oakland all the time. He would because he was the best at it. You know, he would sit there and he would throw that front hipper to lefties, and then they would do like this, and it would go whoop, and then the lefty kind of does the
that's my favorite.
And then he would go like this, and he would come in the next day, and it's the only pitches he would watch. He'd come in and click the video, and he'd sit there, and he's watching the video the next day, and he'd click on those, and he'd go, and he just watching front hip guys, and he would just laugh, and then he'd get up and walk out, and I would be like, that's pretty cool. And I didn't do it at the time, but then like I remember now doing it, and I just think about him always, just that little chuckle that he would do. It was cool.
So how did you get your 2-seamer to let's go through some pitch grips, and I'll ask some questions actually while you're doing it. Maybe start out with the 2-seamer, because that doesn't seem intuitive to me, that because you're so good at spinning one way. When did you find out that you were able to make a 2-seamer move the way it does, and what was the trial and error behind it, and what does the grip look like?
So when I was young, going back to that, like I threw my fastball like this. I with small hands.
Gallen did the same thing. That's why his changeup actually is good. He doesn't necessarily pronate it great, but he throws a 3-finger.
So when I was young, I threw my fastball like this, and then when my hands got big enough to throw a fastball, the only way I know what to do was I did this. So my whole life, I threw a 2-seam fastball. I didn't start throwing a 4-seam fastball until I got into pro ball. So I would always throw 2-seam fastball and curveballs, 2-seam fastballs and curveballs. And I threw it glove side forever. And then I got into college, and DJ would never let me throw a slider, because at the time I was younger, and he would always say that he didn't want it to take away from my curveball. My curveball was my bread and butter then. It's my bread and butter now. So I threw 2 seams and curveballs. Got into pro ball and started turning it over and started throwing some more 4 seams. So I think the 2-seam has just been something that I've done forever. It's just my natural fastball. When I grip a fastball, this is naturally how I just want to grip it. It's just your standard 2-seam fastball. And I never knew.
Does it come off your hand though? Like it doesn't come off straight like that, right? You're coming. No, it's coming.
So my arm is here with the ball, right? So if I'm looking straight on you,
yep.
It's a little here. So it's not, and I'm never trying to turn it or anything. I'm trying to pull straight down. So I'm trying to come, and I'm just trying to pull straight down. And why that happens is then you get the big shape of it spinning like this, and then it takes off. So I'm just coming in, and the more down I try to pull with it, the more it will go up. And I'm not trying to sink it. Like I'm not trying to throw a sinker. I'm not trying to make the ball go like this. I'm trying to make it go like this.
Yep. The opposite of what a sweeper would be. You're throwing a 2-seamer, basically keeping its plane, trying to get some carry, not sink. And yep.
Yes. Trying to get it to do that. And I'm also trying to throw it. That's one pitch that I'm more times than not trying to throw it up and into righties, or up and into lefties, and have it do that, So I'm not really trying to throw it down and away to lefties or down and away to righties. At times, down and away to righties for freeze or whatnot, but it's just naturally this way. And when I start getting a little bit too here with it, is when it becomes a little worse, or it's more or less like get it out in front and just come down with it and let my natural hand position kind of take the ball and let it do that. I'm not trying to over analyze it or overthrow it, or I'm not trying to make it do anything that it's not going to just naturally do.
Gotcha. Did anybody try to get you to make it sink? Because to me, there was a thought that if you're going to throw 2-seamers, it's got to be down in the zone. We've stopped that, thankfully. Now you can throw
Mhm.
two seamers up in the zone, and it's really effective for some guys. But back in the day, it was always, you want to live down. If you're throwing a two seamer, it's got to sink. Were there people that tried to make you do that?
At times I can say like, yes, you want to throw the two seam down and away to lefties. But back in, 13, 14 and whatever, before hitters changed their swing, like a two seam down and away, like that's what you used to live, right? You used to live two seams down and away, and that would get you the ground ball to second base.
Right.
8 out of 10 times. Hitters stopped doing that, and they started doing this more. And then once they started doing this, that two seam down and away became doubles and homers to left center, because guys are big and strong, and that's kind of what it became, right? When hitters started stop going that way for the two seam, they started going that way and thinking that, then that's when pitchers then made the adjustment. Okay, like now we need to get the ball up. But now, depending on where, for me, it was like where up, up middle or up and away is different than up in. So I threw my two seam down and away to lefties. Just kind of like middle down would play better. But I really started, when it really took off and I started getting the freezes, was later in my career, was like started a little in 18, and then 19, 20 is when it became. And that was, I think it was because I started doing so much of the work up and in. So then it became in 19. I remember saying like, so if I'm throwing four seams up and in, and this is kind of like when you're thinking like, okay, now what's next? So I'm throwing so many four seams up and in now. So now if I start something off the plate and I throw it at their hands and it comes up and in and it shoots that way, then that could be something that plays. So I started doing that in 19 a lot. And instead of trying to throw it down, then I started trying to throw it when we're trying to freeze. I'm trying to throw it. I don't want to move their feet. I want to move their body.
Mm.
And that's when the two seam up and in or kind of like became a pretty big pitch.
Where do you start it? So when you're starting your two seam, are you starting it, like what do you visualize where you want to throw it to, or where do you want it to end up basically?
Where I want it to end up.
Okay. So you're not starting it at a hitter. You're not starting, you're saying you have enough confidence of, where it's going to move, that you're saying, I'm going to look at this spot where you want it to finish.
With that pitch. Yes. With that pitch, I'm not looking at their elbow or their hands or anything. And I'm saying like, okay, I'm going to throw it right there and let it do that. I like to have a glove. I'm a big into like the catcher give me a glove. And then once they give me a glove, I'm trying to throw it at the glove. Like it's more of an end pitch for me. Like I'm looking where I want the pitch to end rather than where I want to start it.
Gotcha. Let's go to, you pick your pitches. You want to go to a cutter?
Yeah, cutter's new for me this year.
Yeah. So what's up with that? I've noticed that. And to me, is that to play up, to tunnel off your two seamer? Like you get to go different ways or what?
No, it was, I tried to do it last year and I tried to do it in the past, but my four seam naturally cutting a little bit. So last year so here's my four seam.
Okay.
Right. So I do everything off the Rawlings. So everything off the Rawlings logo. So I grip my pointer finger and I put it right on the Rawlings logo.
Mm-hmm.
And then I put my hand beside it.
Gotcha.
Okay. So when I was trying to do a cutter, I would take the ball and I would turn it like this. So now I'm still on the Rawlings, but I'm kind of offset.
Yep.
But what I was doing when I did that is I would get here and my hand positioning was slider, right? So I'm trying to throw a cutter, but my hand positioning is slider. And instead of my hand positioning being fastball and letting the grit of the ball come off like that.
Yep.
And I think because I could get on this seam right here and I could feel like, because, that's that, but my curveball is just tilted up on it. So it's kind of the same. So my curveball is more here. So I was here with it. And then last year it was inconsistent. It was 80. The cutter was 83 to 84. And it was most people's sliders, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It was moving maybe 10 inches left and like 3 inches down or something. And that's not really a cutter, right? Yeah. And it was just a glove side pitch that I would always miss glove side. So I'm like, man. So I still played with it and I still tried to throw it. And then, so then this year in spring, and I really wanted to figure that pitch out because I just think it's such an important pitch to be able to do and to add to my arsenal. So what I did in spring was I just gave it a completely different feel from everything else. So I would take my four seam here and I turned it up this way. So I take the Rawlings and then I just turned the cutter up this way. It felt more fastball-y, right? Uh-huh. So it just felt more like a fastball, and I wasn't trying to over manipulate it now and do this. So I just took it like this, and instead of throwing my four seam, I rotated the cutter up, and I offset it a little bit, and then I just put, I kind of just can hold it like this, right? This finger is just kind of on it, but if if you're tight with the middle finger and the thumb, like that's kind of like I honestly could throw it like this. And this finger is just there for guidance on it. So when I did that, and then I got into I pulled up on the computer in spring, and it was like, okay, can you pull up, ask DJ, who is great. He does our video and all the slow-mo cameras here and stuff. And I was like, can you pull up on the screen? Can you pull up my four-seam fastball, my cutter, and my slider? And can you put up where my hand is when I'm throwing the ball on all of them? And what I saw was my four seam was here. And then I had the cutter grip, and my cutter was here. And then my slider was also here. So my cutter and my slider, my hand was in the same position. And I'm just like, makes sense. So like for the cutter, it just needs to be in the middle, right? Like it's not a four seam. It's not a slider. It's just kind of like there. Mm-hmm. And you got to just trust that moving it in the middle is going to make it go 5 to the left, and it's still going to have some vert to it, right? It's going to be 5 left and 5 up. So, and then the velo is going to be up, because I'm always with that pitch. It's just the velo thing for me. It needs to be an 87 to 89 pitch. So now it was like, okay, so now it was stick in an 88 cutter. So now you have, which is what we talked about earlier, it was four seam, cutter, and then big one. So it was like, it was just a pitch to, if you're looking at those plots, like, it's just a pitch that stick in the middle to hide everything. It hides my four seam, it hides my slider, it hides my two seam, and then it hides my curveball. Now I've got a pitch that I can stick right in the middle of all of them with a good velo that I can control, because it's a smaller moving spin pitch. It's a spin pitch, it's a fastball, it's both, right? So now it's a pitch that you can stick right in the middle. And that was the biggest thing that helped me, is I just kind of differentiated it. I took, instead of taking the four seam,
total feel thing. You just, you flip the baseball and just feels different.
Flipped it, and it felt bigger, and now it felt there. And then it was like, okay, now trust it. And I threw a bullpen with it, and it was 88, and it was right where I wanted it to be. And I was like, okay, cool. So that was kind of what I did with the cutter.
Because I've also noticed that it varies a little bit. The movement kind of can change around. It like takes up, if you're looking at your plots, there's a good bit of variation on your cutter too.
So that's a pitch that I have started manipulating a little bit more lately, because once I got a good feel for the cutter, then it was like, okay, now I know how to throw it, right? Like I was searching of the hand positioning for it for a year and a half, maybe. So now that I feel like, okay, whenever I want it to be 5 and 5 at 89, I know how to do it. Mm-hmm. So then it was like, okay, like what's next with that pitch? Like what's the next evolution of that pitch? And it was, okay, can you throw it at 87? Can you throw it at 87 and now get it at 5 on the 0 line, and then throw it underneath? So can you throw it down and away to righties, but now can you throw it down underneath to lefties? Can you take it 5 and underneath, and then now it becomes like a firm, it becomes like a firm slider that's just like a tight little bullet that goes underneath on the plate that misses the barrel. So that was like the last couple of weeks, I guess. Now it's like, okay, what's the next evolution of that pitch?
How do you do that? How do you make that change? Is it visualizing it and you don't have to change your position or your hand position at all? You're just thinking it? Because sometimes that'll happen kind of automatically if you just envision a smaller break or envision a bigger break. Or are you consciously doing it?
I'm just like looking at a shape in my head that I want the ball to. I'm like, okay, like I want this ball to go like this. Then I'm like, okay, now I want this ball to go like this. And then just do it. It's just in visualizing shapes with me. I want this slider to move like this, but now, I want the slider to move like this, but now I want the next one to move like this. And then I want same with the cutters. Like I want this cutter to be 88 and I want it to be short in the zone, down and away for a ground ball to short or a foul ball or a soft contact or called strike, right? So now when I get to 2 strikes, say to a lefty or something, I get to 2 strikes. I want this slider. I want the shape of it to be like this, or this cutter. I want the shape of it to be like this. And now it's just a location thing, right? Now it's just trusting it on the plate and down. So I think naturally, if you throw it up, it's probably going to have a little bit more of vert to it.
Yep.
And then if you throw it on the plate down, naturally, it's probably going to have a little less vert and stay closer to that 0 line. But it's just visualizing shapes with me in my head. I visualize the shape that I want the pitch to do, and then I just do it.
Yeah. So talking to Darvish, what he does is he changes his thumb position.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, if I do this, it's 90. If I do this, it's 85. If I move my hand this way, it's going to have this much shape. And it sounds like if you envision the shape you want it to go, it's probably going to happen automatically with you. You're just like painting in your head.
The thumb positioning is big for sure.
Okay.
The thumb positioning, taking like on a slider, for instance, like having it underneath right here. Yes. But then if you move your thumb up, for me, then moving your thumb up here will make it go. For me, when I have my thumb up, it comes out a little tighter and a little harder. When I have my thumb underneath it, it's a little slower and a little bigger. So thumb positioning on not necessarily the cutter for me. It's more of like taking it from here to taking it up, and like instead of it's like boom, it's like now it's just like a little bit more of that, but with the slider and like breaking pitches, moving your thumb around and just playing with it, like definitely can make the ball do different things by moving your thumb. That's something for sure that helps.
Well, let's talk about your slider some, because it sounds like it's a bunch of different, you can make it do a whole bunch of different things. Let's see that grip again.
So slider is
a two seam slider, which is in vogue now because everybody's going for the sweeper, which gets, obviously you don't have to know it to be able to throw it, but the way the ball moves through air on a two-seamer a two-seam slider tends to make like the seam shifted wake thing, and the ball will move a little extra. You obviously didn't develop it when people even knew that. It was just the way you always held it. Yeah,
well, so the slider's probably the pitch that I've changed the most over the course of my career. Because in Oakland, I did do this. I didn't throw the slider like that. I did, when we were talking about cutters in Oakland, I did kind of take my 4-seam and offset and throw it hard. But that slider I threw at the first 5-6 years of my career was more of a downer. It was more of a 86 to 89 downer.
Mm-hmm.
So it was actually like, I didn't learn about this pitch to throw a slider like this. I was in New York talking to Masahiro Tanaka, and he threw a good slider, and he located, and it was 84, and I always wanted to get the slider that you could throw and you could get a swing and miss on, and the catcher catches it down and away. Like that was always just something that I was like, oh, that's a nice one. Like it's like this far off the plate, and the catcher catches it, and they still swing and miss at it. And I was like, so I'd ask him how he throws it, and he showed me just like this, and I was like, huh. I was like, that's interesting. So then I started doing that a little bit then, and then when I went to Cincinnati, that's how I threw my slider. And they were like, that's perfect because that's kind of that's exactly like how we would tell people to throw their slider now. So that's something that I've changed. In Cincinnati in 19, I did have it more like this. So I threw my slider like this.
That's a weird grip.
But then over the last year or so, I have tightened this back up and kind of moved my thumb back up a little bit with it. And I think it just helps me with the more power with it. But I threw it like this for a while. I threw it like this for a while and really tried to get around it. And then, like I said, now I do tighten it back up now. So that's kind of where it's living right now.
Gotcha. And you can change the movement on it based on where you put your thumb. Do you do anything else different? Is it visualizing and moving your thumb, I suppose?
Visualizing it. The biggest thing for me with the slider is moving my thumb, like moving my thumb up. It just helps it with, I don't want a slider that I'm throwing and it goes like this. Like I don't want it to come off my hand and go right. So by moving my thumb, but sometimes when my thumb's underneath it, I do that and I feel like it will pop, right? So like your thumb's underneath it, and I feel like it will kind of like pop.
Yep.
Then start side spinning, but it'll come off like, you know what I'm saying? So like by moving my thumb up, it gives it nowhere. Thumbs like keeps it from going that way first. So it's like if I can move my thumb up on it, now it's like when I'm throwing it, the thumb is there to keep it from squirting out the backside, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the thumb will help me from the ball squirting up. Now I can really pull on it down, and the thumb is just there for long enough to make it come out more of a straight line for that way. Where if my thumb's underneath it sometimes, then sometimes it feels like it will squirt, it will kind of like slip out this way and kind of like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%. Do you vary? Is it like two different positions? You'll have one underneath, one on the side, or can you do ranges of like, maybe I'm gonna do a little less this time, little?
That'll vary. That'll just vary from game, to be honest with you. The thumb will vary. That is a fixture. Like it'll, in a perfect world, I like to have it kind of like right there in the middle. But then there are some times when it's like a 2-strike count to a righty that is super high swinger, like big chaser. Like I need this thing to be off the plate, down and away. Then those are the ones that I'll tend to pop my thumb up a little bit more, just to know that like, where's this miss going to be? The miss on this pitch is going to be, white line, left-handed batter's box, white line away, and I still got a chance on a swing in an 0-2 or a 1-2 count. But then if you need it, sometimes I need it a little closer, then I will kind of like bury my thumb under it a little bit more. But I think the times of me kind of having my thumb directly underneath it is probably come and gone. But I do know if I move my thumb up, it just helps the miss is going to be more glove side. Gotcha.
One thing I've noticed too, before I skip to another pitch, you change your you'll mess with timing. I don't know if it's a you thing or if you're noticing somebody has a big leg kick and you're going to throw them off by maybe, varying your own leg kick, but it creates multiple pitches out of the same pitch because you're able to change a hitter. You're able to mess with a hitter's timing multiple ways, one changing speeds, but also changing your speed of your mechanics. Is that on purpose?
Yeah, it started it honestly started with leg kick guys, because guys started having their timing right, and they're going in, and it was like, okay, when guys have the big leg kick, then I would do the double leg pump.
Yep.
To just kind of like, then it kind of like they're going off of you, right? So then if you go up and then you go up again, then they're kind of just like a little bit more like their big leg kick, and then they're trying to hold it, but then they're going, you know what I'm saying? So
yeah,
started with big leg kick guys, and then what I noticed over time is like when I have a tendency to, sometimes like I have a tendency to rush with my lower half and my arm won't catch up. So then it started from that, like big leg kick guys, you can disrupt their timing. And hitting and pitching is all about like throwing pitches in different locations, changing your speed, but also like disrupting the hitter's timing, right? So like, and then it started with when I feel like my legs are going a little too fast and my arm's not catching up, then now the double leg just kind of gets me to stay back with my lower half just enough to like lock it back in one time. And now my body feels back in sync. So now I'm like, okay, now everything is back on time. And now I'm ready to deliver a pitch. So it started with the big leg kick guys, and now sometimes I'll do it when I'm just trying to feel my lower half and my upper half kind of like get it back connected. So I'm not like leaking or drifting with my front side too much, going too fast, and my arm doesn't catch up.
Gotcha. So it's not necessarily messing with the hitter all the time. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's a matter of you getting back into sync. And that's a way to do it. Yep. Makes sense. Curveball. And I did read where you kind of started your curveball by like taping your fingers together or something like that to make them feel like they're moving as one.
Yeah. I used to do that in college. I would take these fingers and I would just like really like, I'd tape them together just to make sure that they're one. And then I would, so now I've got both my fingers together. I hadn't done that in a while. But now, yeah, it's all about with a curveball for me. This is how I throw it. So I'm still throwing it on the two seams, and I've always thrown it like that. If you want to have a more traditional 12-6 curveball, I think you do throw it with the four seams. And I've done that before, but it's just for me, it's just not it. This is it for me. And so it's here, these two fingers on the horseshoe. And then the thumb underneath here, and it's the same. I'm trying to throw it as hard as I can, and what you're doing with it is you're taking these fingers, and you're not just holding the ball right here, right? You're doing the same thing that I was kind of mentioning on that cutter with that middle finger. Is you're taking it and then you're hooking it, right? So you take it and then you're creating as much leverage on that seam as you can. So you're here with your fingers, and then you're hooking your fingers kind of there. And if you honestly look at it, like at times, like see this pointer finger?
It's a little raised, yeah.
It's raised, but it's really driving. It's pushing.
Oh, so you're okay. So I got you. And that's one reason why you would never throw like a knuckle curve or spike curve is because you need that other finger to help you.
Yeah, it's just creating as much force into this seam as you can, right?
Yeah,
so it's like,
all right.
I'm driving it into that finger, and if you can see the tension in my middle finger, you can get the lighting right.
Yeah.
See now see when I let go of it, see how it kind of like.
Yep.
And now more of
yeah. So you are really utilizing both fingers, because a lot of pitchers will say, really, I don't do anything with my pointer finger. It's all middle finger for me. You're using both to create that torque on the baseball, which is probably, really helpful for your spin.
For me, it is. I'm trying to do it as much as I can, at least, like if you're going to say, yeah, could I throw a curveball like this? Absolutely. Like, absolutely. But for me, it's there, it's hovering, and it's just driving it there as much. I am using these fingers more, obviously, like you are using that more, but that finger is definitely there. Sometimes it'll be down too. It's just kind of.
Are you gripping it hard?
I'm gripping it as hard as I can. I'm gripping that curveball as firm as I can grip it.
Gotcha. Let's go to. Do you view your slider as a sweeper? I know we have this new categorization as a sweeper.
Like that sweeper term.
Yeah, you don't like it?
I get it. I just don't know, how do you differentiate it? My thing with that is like, if you're looking at a movement of a pitch, like a guy's throwing a pitch that goes 12 inches left and 3 inches down, and they'll call it a sweeper. And then the next guy will come in and it'll move 12 inches left and 3 inches down. They're calling it a slider. So I'm like, is that just like a term that the pitcher wants to use it? Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally get it. But I do understand the difference between when you were throwing if you're throwing a four seam one and it's going mostly down, That's kind of what traditionally we would view as slider, the bullet spin type thing. So I think, I mean, it's tough. And I think
you can classify them as two different things.
Yeah. And I think that's
a two seam and a sinker is two different pitches, right? Like if you're killing vert on a two seam, call it a sinker. If it's more of a 15 and 15, you can call it a two seam. If it's more of a 15 and 3, then you can call it a sinker.
Nailed it. That's exactly what I was going to say is I view a two seamer and a sinker very differently. And you're throwing a two seamer. If you thought of it like a sinker, it would suck for you because you're trying to throw it up and in sometimes, and it's not a sinker.
I understand.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So let's the change up. This is a work in progress, or
I've thrown it more this year than I have probably in my career. Yeah. I went to Vandy this offseason and really, really, really worked on, and I'm just, it's just your traditional change up here.
So it's a two seam grip, normal circle change. Yeah. And you're not pronating it?
I'm not thinking of pronating it. I'm thinking of doing the exact same thing I am with my two seam. And it's to be honest with you, it's been a good pitch for me this year. It's something that I probably could use a little bit more, to be honest with you. And maybe there'll be a time where I'm starting to get more and more and more comfortable with it. But it's the same idea as forever. I've always tried to, put your fingers on this side, and you've always tried to. I'm not a pronator, which so I've always throw the circle at home plate, like throw the circle at home plate, like never worked for me. Never been something that I could do. I've thrown this in the past to try and
I was going to say a splitter would be the other thing to think about.
Yeah, I've done that before, but I'm currently, and I really like it. It's more of sitting as your traditional two seam changeup, I guess, and throwing it, just let your natural hand position. And I don't completely understand. I understand the seam shift thing. It's with the big circle, right?
Exactly. Yep. You
can get the big circle to be here. So if I could lay it, when the good ones, or when I'm naturally here with it, and then I just, instead of thinking pronate, like trying to lay it down a little bit.
Yep.
So like the same positioning on the side, but if I can lay it down a little bit more, I do get more of that drop to it.
Yep.
But it's been good. It really has. It's been it's sitting around like 15, 16, and right around like 3 vert. I've thrown some in the bullpen, and I've thrown a lot that have been that I'm starting to get some negative vert to it. Haven't been able to translate that into the game yet, but I do feel like it's closer. But I worked on it a lot at Vandy, and they were kind of throw it just kind of like you would your cutter, just like you would your fastball, and then let it just come out, right? Let it come out like that, and let it just do its thing. So the more I try to manipulate that pitch, the worse it is, and the more I do, sometimes I'll get here and I will try and pronate and do this, and it becomes more of a runner, rather than something that has depth. I need to think of it I started to think of it as an on the plate and down, like a depth pitch. Thinking of it as like instead of thinking of it as a runner, I'm thinking of it now as like keeping it on the plate and thinking of it as a depth pitch, and it's getting there.
You're aggressive with it though, like mentally you're throwing it, you're thinking fastball, you're attacking a hitter with it, or you try. To me, a lot of times a changeup is a mentality pitch, and if you're thinking about attacking a hitter, it usually actually works better, I think, maybe for some folks.
It works better. It's like a happy medium for me. For what I've learned, it's the good ones that I've thrown in the game. I'm thinking of it as at probably like an 80% pitch. When I'm starting to throw them like full, when I throw them full tilt, are the ones that have been more runners. So but then when I'm thinking of it as like a 80%, like aggressive, like aggressive out in front, because if you're not aggressive out in front with your hand, then it's you're going to get lazy with it. But it's still aggressive out in front, but it's aggressive at, like, for me right now, it's aggressive at like 80%, I would say.
Okay.
And those are the ones that I've, they're kind of like sitting around like 85 to 87, which is kind of where I would love for it to live. Still gonna, 88 and 89 when they're fine when I'm aggressive and I click it. So it's getting there. It'll couple more weeks. I think it'll be there for sure.
It's one of those things that I think you learn how to use it in a game based on experience, seeing what hitters are doing, all that. Yeah.
You got to throw it though. You got to throw it, and you got to. That's the thing, is that for so long I've just done this, and I'm still doing that. But like, it's just like, but it's something that I am. I'm throwing a little bit more, and the results have been there. So now it's like just finding the right spots to use it, right? Like finding the right spots and the right counts and the right situations and the right hitters to use it now is kind of the evolution of this thing for me. Is like, yes, now you are going to throw it. You're confident in throwing it, but now the timing of when to throw it and knowing when to throw it is I'm starting to understand that a little bit better now.
You're not a 6'4" dude. You're not this monster pitcher. Everybody wants the guys with that prototypical build back then, but you're athletic. You move really well. You can spin the ball really well. Was there ever a bias against you because of your height that you had to overcome? And how do you use that to your advantage, your size to your advantage, your ability to move to your advantage?
I always heard this. I guess I was drafted in 2011, and that was kind of like, that's when you're looking for the 6'2" pitcher that has that, they got that downhill angle. In short righties, you'll never be a starter in this league. You're destined for the bullpen. I heard that forever. I'm a little over 5'10" on a good day. So you heard it forever. I heard it all through college. And then I heard it on the draft day, 2011. Because I was drafted, I was picked by the A's at 18th overall. And, it was, but all the teams before that, it was like, you're destined for the bullpen. You're not going to be a starter in the big leagues. You're too short. You're not what we're looking for, this and that. So I heard that forever. You don't throw a changeup. You can't be a starter in the big leagues without a changeup. So you're a 5'10" righty that doesn't throw a changeup. There's no way that you're going to be a starter in the big leagues. I heard it forever, and and I came in in 11, got drafted, and then in 12 it was every other, in the minors it was every other pitch, or one out of every 3 pitches you got to be a changeup. You got to throw a changeup. I'm just kind of like, well, why? Make no sense to me. Also, like, I'm pretty spinny, so when I land, I'm like, I land and I'm spinny,
Mm-hmm.
So you got to clean up your delivery. So I tried cleaning up my delivery a little bit in the first half of that minor league season in 12, like staying on the plate, kind of like, think of like Greg Maddux-ish, like you throw the pitch and you're in that perfect fielding position, right? Like that was kind of like the thing. And but kind of, we were talking about a little bit earlier, is like being great at what you're good at took away from my spin a little bit, because now I'm staying on the plate and I'm not able to spin. Sure, my changeup might have been fine, but my curveball got worse. Everything got a little worse. And then about halfway through that season in 2012, we had a scout in Oakland. His name was Billy Owens, and he comes in and he says, right before the All-Star break or whatever, because I got drafted in 11 and went to Double-A, pitched 5 games, like 20 innings ish, gave up 1 run, and was just doing my thing, right? 12 came in, and now I needed to throw a changeup. My four seam cut a little bit, so we had a black line on the ball, like, because my four seam cut, that wasn't going to play. So I'm trying to really stay behind it and finish this way. And thinking about everything else other than being an athlete, going out there and just competing my little what off, and just getting people out. So about halfway through that season, he came in and he said, "We drafted you because you're incredibly athletic and you know how to pitch. You compete. You're incredibly athletic." And he said, "I don't care what happens from here on out. The rest," he said, "go out there and just be you. Go out there and do your thing." And I was like, "Yeah, but I'm trying to, And he was like, "I don't." And he kind of jumped me a little bit, and I was like, "Hey, I like that." Well, I responded really well to that. I was like, so back half of 2012, I started just letting it rip again, letting it rip, spinning the baseball, just going out there and competing, being an athlete, being athletic and doing my thing. And second half of 12 was good. Went into 13, did well, got called up in 13, and kind of like, I remember that, and I still talk about it at times. I remember that very vividly. We were in San Antonio, Texas, in Double A. Took me back into like the kitchen, or kind of like to the back, and I was actually pitching that day. And he just said, "Go out there and be you. Be athletic, compete. Just go out there and be yourself." And I was like, and I still remember that for forever. And that was a good one.
It's funny because I was on MLB Network breaking you down or saying something about like why you're so good. And I said, to me, you're one of those guys that you just have to let be yourself. Like, you have great ability to spin the baseball. You move really well. And back in the day, it was always about trying to cookie cutter people. You're right. Like, move down here. You have to do this. You have to finish in a fielding position. We want our fastballs to have 100% spin efficiency, all that, which took away the individualization of folks, which is what makes you successful. The things that make you successful are being an outlier at something, not being what everybody else is. And frankly, if you were trying to move the same way as a dude who was 6'4" and take all your athleticism out, then you're just competing with both hands behind your back, basically.
Yeah, you're right. And I think that's probably for everybody, right? Like, every pitcher's is, like we said earlier, there's not one way to do it. It's being an outlier is correct. What you said, being an outlier is whatever it may be. If you can be an outlier in something and go out there and use it to your advantage, then I think you're in a position to be successful.
Is that a little bit of what happened in New York? I mean, I get asked this about, and I know this isn't the case, and I've seen your interview. I think Cece did an interview with you too. Like, people get this fake feeling like, oh, this guy can't handle it in New York. Like, the pressure's so big. Knowing you're a competitor. Like, I know that that's not the thing, but it's also you're hearing a bunch of voices that people are saying, hey, this is the way we do it here. And you're wanting to be a player that's coachable to some extent. Is that some of this tension that happened there? Or?
I think you're right. You do want to be coachable, right? But this was also at the time when I was coming from Oakland, going to New York, and this was 2017. So now we're at the part of my career where Rapsodo, TrackMan, spin direction, it's kind of coming into play now, right? Now people are starting to, I think Houston was first.
Yeah.
Yankees weren't far behind, but they were not there yet. But having said that, that was a little bit kind of along the same things that was happening earlier in that 2012 season that I mentioned. It was like, do this, and I'm, I'm a big why? Can you tell me why? And at the time it was my four seam, the spin, like the total, like the how fast it spins or whatever was very fast. Like, it was top 5 in the league or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So throw your four seam at the top, this and that. But as we talked about earlier, my hand is in a little bit of a supinated position.
So you're not getting that carry necessarily.
I'm not getting carry. So yeah, my four bends like nobody's business. But at the same time, I'm carrying it at 14 inches, 14 to 15 at times, right kind of along that zero line of horizontal. It's not like yes, it's spinning hard, but I'm not spinning it hard and getting 20 and 6 or 7, arm side. It's not going like that. It's kind of going like that, right? So it's kind of flatter. So when I'm throwing the ball up and away to righties, up and away to lefties, up and away to righties, it's not going above their barrel, right? It's not going.
You're actually finding barrels instead.
It's flattening out and kind of going into their barrels. Lefties, it's kind of a little bit different because it has a little cut to it, so it can get in on there. It can jam them a little bit. But I was never a guy that was like, hey, throw your fastball up in the zone. It was always down and away to righties, down and away to lefties, into righties, or excuse me, into lefties, like kind of like, into lefties because it has that little cut to it. 2 seams into righties, 2 seams into lefties. Just my fastball would just move different directions, right? But it was never let's go up in the zone. And at the time, looking back, we didn't kind of know that exactly. We just knew that spinning 4 seams played better at the top. And in general, I would say they do.
Yeah.
But mine doesn't as much. So that was one. It was get your fastball to the top as much, up and away, up and away, up and away. And it took a little bit away from who I was, and everything was good. Velo was good, this and that. But I'd always been my 4 seam it plays better down and away to righties because it has that little cut to it, and then they kind of run out. So that took a little bit of time, and then once stuff can start kind of, I don't want to say snowballing, but once it kind of like gets going in a direction, and now you're kind of like, then you start searching, you maybe lose a little bit of your competitiveness, and you're kind of like, you don't have like a tight-lit plan and like this is what I do, this is what I'm after. Now you're kind of like, you're kind of looking at everything through a broader lens, and you're like, what do I do? Like, instead of like, no, this is what I do. Now this is what I'm going to do. So I tried to do, because I tried, but it was a lot of whys, so that was 17. And then 17 was fine. And then you come back in, and now the information's getting a little bit, now people are starting to understand it a little bit more. 18 happens, and I think the Astros are still the ones, and they had Verlander and Garrett, 2 of the guys who did have they had the best fastballs at the top, right? Like the way that their balls carried and the way that they spun and did everything, like that was, kind of what everybody was chasing. But at the same time, it's like, in order to do that, your fastball had to play a certain way. And then sliders and curveballs, I kind of, it just wasn't as tight for me. Leaving New York and going to Cincinnati after that 2018 season, it was a little bit more of the same as the Billy Owens situation, where this is, and I got with Caleb Cotham, who I played with at Vandy, anchor down, and then DJ was there, and he knew me really, really well. So, and then Kurt was there, and he was catching, and he played with him at Vandy. So it was kind of like, okay, I was around people who really, really knew me as a person and as a pitcher and as a competitor again. So then they kind of knew, was like, no, when it comes to me in particular, it was like, no, start with what he's the best at, which is just competing and being himself and going out there. And so that's kind of where they started when I left New York. Was they started with that part of the pitching. It wasn't, they didn't start with the, hey, throw this pitch here and do this and that. It was like, no, they started with this side of it, right? Like, and then they started integrating, and they started teaching me how to understand the TrackMan, how to understand the Rapsodo, where my fastballs played the best, and then could tell me why, because of what my fastball did. Up and into lefties is great. It's a great spot. I mean, and for 2, 3, 4 years, that's been 80% of the fastballs that I throw to lefties is up and in, because now that little cut, you don't let them get their hands extended, is great. And then when you're talking about to righties, down and away is best for me. And if you want to get something close to their hands, and take your two seam and throw it at their hands. You don't want to let guys get extended, right? So it was kind of like the opposite of where I was throwing it in New York. It wasn't let's beat guys with spin at the top. Now it was like, so I just got really back to being me and understanding, and then understanding the information a little bit better, which helped. So it was, looking back, it was a very important time in my career, to be able to kind of like be blocked off and kind of like, but then to re-understand and reevaluate, learn. So then we started, then I started started over a little bit again, right? And created a different arsenal, had different pitches that now I threw, but I could throw them with 100% conviction and confidence, because I understood that it's actually, this is the hitter's weakness, and this is where your fastball plays the best. This is, you know what I'm saying? So it was like,
yeah.
So it was cool to learn that. And then I started learning the information, and I started learning how to read it, and I learned what everything meant. And then just kind of like went from there.
So there are some guys that love to be told what to do, and they will do it 100%. And then there are some people that need to know why, because it helps them replicate it. And once you know why, you can build off that. Like you can say, you never forget it because you're not memorizing something. You know the reason behind something. And then with your creativity, you can say, and what if I did this? Now that I know why this plays well, what if I made it move a little more this way? What if I paired it with this other pitch? So I definitely see, like, you're one of those creative folks. And again, I lump you in with Darvish, who I view as kind of a similar type pitching artist. He has so many different ways to make his cutter move and stuff, that things that I hadn't even thought of he can do. And if you limit him, they tried to limit him to throwing like a couple of pitches. Hey, simplify your arsenal. And if you do that, you're taking away what made him great, which is his ability to have feel and be creative on the mound. And he felt, you can feel kind of handicapped at that.
Yeah, it's funny that you keep mentioning Darvish, because I remember I would watch Darvish 19 and 20 and in 21. And when I was trying to sit there and I was like, okay, like what's next? Like, what else can you do? So then I would watch Darvish and I'd be like, okay, like he's throwing, okay, so now he's throwing one at 88, and now he's throwing one at 80. Okay, and then with the way that the cameras were, you could see how he was holding it, and you could see how it was coming off of his hand, and you could see like kind of what he was doing. So I always would love watching Darvish. I would go to like YouTube or sit down with some of the coaches during some times that we had, and I would be like, okay, what's let me see. And then they could pull up the plots, right? You have those plots of like where his pitches are moving or this and that. And you can say like, oh, okay, so like if you can get this to 15-2 or whatever, okay, so that's what the pitch is doing. And then you look at it on the video and stuff. So I always would watch Darvish and watch like kind of how he would spin the ball and do that type of stuff. So he's always been a fun one for me to watch and follow, because I just always like watching him shape breaking balls differently, and then throw his fastball off of it, and then you start learning the tunneling thing, and then you start learning that, okay, so if I throw a four seam that does this, and now I throw a cutter that does this, and now I throw a slider that does this, all relatively throwing it at so I'm throwing three pitches in the exact same spot. One's 93, one's 88, and one's 83. And they're all kind of like, and then once you start doing this, now guess what? Now you take one that starts here and make it go there. So it's just like you got all these different things that you're throwing, and then some of them are doing this, some of them are doing this, some, you know, and then you throw one that underneath. Like it's really really fun to start playing with that type of stuff.
Great point. And you brought up something that I've noticed is I view you as one of the best tunnelers in the game. And I was curious to see if that's the way your mind worked, because you get some absolutely ridiculous swings off pitches, especially your breaking balls or people taking your two-seamer running back to the plate. And to me, it's because you're tunneling them so well that a hitter's basically guessing. You're starting off the plate. They have to guess, is this a slider, a curveball is going to break one way, two-seamer is going to come back. And you take advantage of that probably better than anybody. Like, you freeze hitters really well, and you get terrible swings, balls that are 3 feet out of the zone. Is that are you visualizing that when you're throwing?
Always. It's one of my favorite things to do. One of my favorite things to do is freeze a hitter with 2 strikes with a fastball, knowing that you've done some spin or whatever. So now it's just like they're looking for spin or something, and you can just tell. This is like when you're telling like a hitter swing or whatever, and then they're kind of like, you throw that slider that's like this far off the plate, and you might have thrown another one, and you're like, oh, I don't know, that was a little too close to take. Like, to not even flinch at it, like you've got to be giving up on anything that starts away. I spin the ball away so much, like you've got to be giving up on that pitch. So now it's like you get a shot at it, right? So now you're like, and that's when it just becomes making one pitch and executing one pitch. Just execute one pitch because you've done the work. You know the pitch is open. So if you throw a slider and it starts here and it goes to here and then the outside corner is here, and you're like, how did you not go at that? So now you throw the two seam that starts here, knowing that they're like, oh, that's away, because like being supinated, everything moves away, right? So now you start one that's here and it comes back to here, and then they're like, and then that's my favorite thing to do.